Hi, everyone. Okay, perfect. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out and attending, and to all of our speakers. My name is Lydia. I'm the president this year of the UTM Anthropology Society at UTM, who's hosting the graduate info session. I know we're not here in person together, but it's nice that we could all be together virtually. I'd like to just start with a land acknowledgement. So, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. So, the way this session will work is we'll be doing a moderated discussion panel with various UTM anthropology professors about graduate school, the application process, and much more. Following this, we will be doing a Q&A towards the end. So if anyone has questions throughout the session, if you just can privately message, you should see a name in the chat called Q&A. Just message our second year rep, Lily, and she will write them down, and then she'll be moderating the Q&A towards the end. And then we have our Vice President Bryn and our Communications Officer Haley, who will be moderating the discussion. So I would just like to briefly introduce the professors from the UTM Anthropology Department that we have with us today, who are here to share more information about graduate school, the application process, much more. So first we have Dr. Esteban Parra, who is a molecular anthropologist. We have Dr. Lauren Schroeder, whose focuses in paleoanthropology and biological anthropology. We have Dr. Steven Dorland, whose focuses in Eastern North American archaeology. We have Dr. Zoe Wool, who is a medical and sociocultural anthropologist, and Dr. Andrew Gilbert, whose focuses in sociocultural anthropology. So now I will turn it over to Bryn, who will start the discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bryn. I apologize in advance. I'm sitting beside my window, which is like right along Dundas. So if you hear any sirens, just ignore them. Okay, so before we begin with our questions about graduate school, if our speakers could briefly introduce themselves, like a little more than how Lydia did, and due to time limitations, if I could just ask you to keep your responses to about 3 minutes each, so then everyone has time to talk. So if we would like to start with Dr. Wool, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. So as Lydia said, I'm a medical and sociocultural anthropologist, also sort of do some work on environmental anthropology. Most of my ethnographic work has been with injured American soldiers and their family members, and I also do field work with members of queer disability communities, and I've done some stuff around disability and technology, working with mechanical engineers who design wearable robotics, so a whole slew of things. And I did my master's degree and my PhD in anthropology here at the University of Toronto. And so I'm just saying this so you have some sort of sense of my institutional homes that might be relevant when we talk about these things. And then I had a postdoctoral position at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and I had a postdoctoral position at Columbia University in New York, and then I had a job for 5 years in the anthropology department at Rice University in Houston. So that's me.
Well, next we have Esteban Parra.
Yeah, so I'm a molecular anthropologist, so I have been really interested for years in studying in general human evolution and also studying adaptation, human adaptation to different environments. So I have been really curious to learn about the genetic architecture, for example, of phenotypes such as skin color, hair color, eye color. I'm also really interested in health research from the biomedical perspective, in particular to understand the genetic risk factors associated with many complex traits and diseases. And for example, I have been involved in studies with diabetes, with lipids, with anthropometric traits. So this is the summary. I did all my degrees in Spain. So I did my undergrad and my master's and my PhD in the University of Santiago in Spain. And I have been at UTM since 2002.
Wow, that's great. You've been here for a while then. That's great.
Yes, 18 years, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we can next introduce Dr. Steven Dorland.
Hello, everybody. So I did my undergrad.
Oh, you're muted, Steve.
You've been muted.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. So my focus is Ontario and upstate New York archaeology, and I look at ceramics. But really my focus more currently is working with Indigenous communities to understand social learning. So I did my PhD research on looking at the archaeology of ceramics and childhood. And now I'm kind of more leaning in the direction of developing and just how to develop that experience with Indigenous communities towards integration of archaeology and Indigenous methodologies. I did my undergrad. I keep getting muted here. This is weird. Okay. I did my undergrad at U of T, and I did my master's and PhD at U of T as well. So I have a little bit of home experience, I guess, involving U of T. And I'm currently teaching now at UTM. So I recognize a number of your faces, and my position as a limited term contract is a advisor, helper of undergraduate students. So I always encourage you just to reach out and email me, and I can always either provide you a link or resource or guidance to questions like this. And this is a great event. These are great events. I didn't go to these in my undergrad, and I think it would have been helpful.
Awesome, great, thank you. And next we have Dr. Lauren Schroeder with us.
Thank you, Bryn. So, hey everyone, I'm Dr. Schroeder. I am a paleoanthropologist, as Lydia said. My focus is mostly on evolutionary process in the human fossil record. So I do work in the genus Homo. I've also worked on various I guess now not necessarily that recently discovered, but I worked on Homo naledi and Australopithecus sediba and those discoveries in South Africa. So a lot of my field work is based in South Africa, but my research is really broad right now. So for example, my lab is also looking at hybridization in canids. So it's very, very broad. In terms of my academic career, I did all of my degrees in South Africa. I'm from Cape Town, South Africa, and so I did my undergrad, my honors, master's, which was upgraded to a PhD at the University of Cape Town. And then from following that, I did a postdoc at the University of Buffalo, so not that far away, just across the border. And then I got the job at UTM. I've been here this is my 4th year now, so yeah, a little while.
Yeah, that's good, that's amazing. And last but not least, we have Dr. Andrew Gilbert.
Hi there. I'll echo the chorus of approval that these kinds of events are fantastic, and I'm glad to see that there's a good group of students here and that it's being recorded for those who, like, Steven, I was one of those that never went until it came time to apply to graduate school, and then it was too late. So it's nice to have that resource there. My own research has been mostly cited in Bosnia and Herzegovina, so very much a kind of classic cultural anthropology kind of trajectory, which is to say to go and study outside of my kind of home society. And there I've studied both kind of post-war international intervention, more recently to kind of labor politics after socialism. And I've moved from being mostly interested in working on producing texts to working in different kinds of media forms. So photo essays. I just did a podcast for the first time, and am part of a graphic ethnography project, which is to say producing an ethnography, but in the form of a comic or a graphic novel. So really kind of interested in branching out and thinking through those kind of multimedial forms. In terms of my own academic trajectory, I feel like I've been through it all. I started out at a community college, then transferred to a state school in California for my undergraduate, then went to a very expensive private university, Georgetown, for my master's, and then University of Chicago for my PhD. And since graduating, in addition to UTM, I was on the faculty at McMaster University for a while, and also a visiting professor in Geneva at the Graduate Institute. And so, you know, kind of bring all those perspectives to the discussion today, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Awesome, great. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. Everyone has a wonderful background that can all contribute to this discussion. So our first question is for Andrew and whoever else would like to chime in. The question is, what is the application project like for graduate school? How do you best create an application for your master's or your PhDs? And also, how are there differences in the applications in your master's and PhD, and what different pathways can lead you into your PhD? I'll post it in the chat because I know that was a big chunk of information.
Yeah, so in thinking about this, I was, so we'll touch on a number of the things that I think I raise here in the other questions. So, you know, for instance, it's questions about supervisor relationships and funding support, et cetera. And so we'll unpack those later. But I mean, the one thing that I was thinking about when it comes to the application process, there's the technical side of things, which is be alert to deadlines, and so on and so forth. And then the components of an application, there are three basic ones. There's your statement, there's your transcripts, and there's your letters of recommendation. You know, you want to give yourself enough time to write a good statement. And in order to do that, you need to do good research on the programs you're applying for. And I'll talk about that in a second. The transcripts are easy these days, especially when you can just order them online and get them sent off. Back when I was applying, you had to go and get a physical one and actually put it in the mail. And then the recommendations, of course, are something else that you want to give yourself plenty of time to get in touch with faculty or whoever you would ask for a recommendation, make sure that they will do it for you, and make sure you give them plenty of time, especially if it's the first time you're asking. So I, for instance, write recommendations for students plenty. That first one is always the one that takes the most time because I'm crafting a narrative about the student and my experience with them. And then for each subsequent recommendation that I get asked for, I will, you know, tweak it a little bit to match the program, but it's that first one that's always the one that takes the most time, and you want to make sure you give faculty like us plenty of time to do that. At the very least, I usually ask for 2 weeks. Maybe other faculty ask for even more time, so that's just something to be aware of. Now, when it comes to thinking about the application process and the components of that process, I think the most important thing is first to do your research. What kind of a program is it? Is it a program like oftentimes in Canada, as well as other programs outside, where you need to basically get a potential supervisor invested or interested in you? Then that's where you need to put your energy. You need to get in touch with them, and please don't be shy about doing that. I always find it kind of interesting that some students feel shy about kind of contacting potential supervisors. Don't feel shy. That's what we're always open to and expecting to be contacted. It's how we build that initial potential interest and relationship. And you also want to do that because you'd certainly want to know if a potential supervisor is not accepting students, or if your interests don't align well with them. So again, that's kind of that first kind of step in putting together a good application, is to figure out who do I need to build a relationship with, and then who do I need to persuade that I'm the person that they want to work with. And that's part of what you do in your statement. And that means contacting them first. It really can't be overstated. The second thing, however, is that there are some programs out there. I'm thinking mostly of master's programs, although perhaps there are some PhD programs where it's less an individual supervisor that you need to engage or imagine as your reader and to get their support, and it's more a program committee. So the one I'm thinking of right now are some of these, not that anyone here is going to be doing that, but they're like, at U of T has a master's in like East European studies, for instance. So if you wanted to go into that, there are no individual supervisors there that you would need to kind of be writing towards and persuade and engage with your statement. It would be more a kind of committee because it's about the program. And there, what a program committee was looking for is, does this person's interests align with what we do? And are they going to be a nice contribution to the general cohort that's coming in that year? And so, you know, those are different ways of writing and imagining your potential readers for your statement. And I would be somebody that would say, and maybe this could be backed up by colleagues, that statement is really the most important thing in your application letter. Obviously, your grades will matter, but usually they matter more along the lines of, does the person kind of meet certain requirements for admission into the university? And does the person have, sometimes we look at transcripts when we're considering funding packages, right? Because if somebody has a sufficiently high transcript, you know, or grade point average, it allows us then to mobilize funding support for that student. But when it comes to admitting them into the program, the transcripts are kind of like a minimum, something that has to be checked off, but it's really the statement that is the most important. And so I would just say again, in thinking of looking towards the application process, is that do your research first. What's the program? Who's the potential supervisor? And then you want to craft a statement that aligns your interests with that place. I can tell you a couple of, I don't know if we would call them mistakes, but application letters or statements of interest that are the least compelling are the ones that seem to have nothing to do with either me or the institution that I'm at, right? So it's just kind of this form letter. Here's what I'm interested in, you know, here's what my goals are, and that's great. And that might be enough to kind of pique my interest. But if you've done the work of saying, and here is how what I want to do aligns with what you do, or what happens at that university, well, then that's much more interesting to me because it says the student's done the work of really figuring out, you know, why they're applying to this place. So again, you probably want to have a general template of what your interests are and your statement, etc. But then you want to relate it or make it relevant to each of the different programs that you apply to. And those could end up being quite different depending upon where it is that you want to go. And then I would say, and this is something that I would in a moment maybe invite others to speak about, but I think that, so oftentimes I've read applications that are very heavy on the personal story that gets me to what I'm interested in, and relatively light on what it is I'm interested in doing. And I think in the end, the best balance is one that does give us an origin story. You know, where do your interests come from? They could come from this really cool class I had as an undergraduate, or this little research project I was engaged in, or something about my background really compels me to want to, you know, become a lawyer or something like that, and intervene in the world in law or as a nurse. Because let's be honest here, none of us are expecting that all of you are going to apply to anthropology graduate programs, right? So this is for, you know, anthropology undergraduate degrees prepare you for a variety of possible graduate programs. So let's not imagine, and none of us expect that that's going to be the case. We have enough experience writing recommendations to know that in fact, we write them for all kinds of different programs. But anyway, I think the ones then that are able to be most specific about what it is you want to do in a program, research especially, but perhaps, you know, some details about the program, are going to be more persuasive that you're a good fit than a lot of backstory about where your interests come from. Again, I like an origin story. I think it helps us to situate and understand a potential student, but in the end, it's more about what is it you want to do. That is kind of important. And then maybe two last points, and then I'll pass it on to somebody else or move on to the next question. There are certainly different expectations between a master's application and a PhD application. For a master's, I would say that I don't expect, students to have a very advanced understanding necessarily of, certain kinds of research areas, et cetera. To some degree, the master's degree is exploratory. It is getting experience maybe for the first time in a certain field that was much more general before. If you're applying for a PhD, however, I'm certainly expecting you to have a pretty decent understanding of the research field that you want to intervene into, to be able to demonstrate that through references to different authors or different kinds of work. So definitely there's a different expectation of the kind of, your ability to articulate your knowledge in relationship to what it is you want to do in a PhD than at the master's level. And then the last thing I would say is, and this is, maybe it's too late for this year, maybe it's not, I don't know. But this is for maybe the Anthropology Society. These sessions are great. I wonder if it wouldn't also be valuable to perhaps in the future have a session in which a couple of faculty and graduates and potential graduate students or applicants get together and read one another's statements and get feedback. Because every once in a while, a student will, well, not every once in a while, often students will send me, when I'm writing recommendations for them, they'll send me their statement and their transcript, because I ask for those things so that I can write a good recommendation. And I always have suggestions to make about the statements and how they could be improved. There might be some, very simple fixes to them, but often it's too late in the process by the time I get it to be able to give any meaningful feedback. So if the Undergraduate Society could organize a kind of workshop early enough in the process to kind of circulate those things and get some feedback, I think that would be really valuable. So that is it for me for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think your idea of a workshop is definitely something, maybe not this year because I know applications are coming up, but definitely next year we'll look into it, and so then people can circulate and see what's needed and wanted. In terms of time, I think I'll just move on to the next question, which is targeted for Lauren. So I think this bounces off is how is a suitable candidate chosen? What is the process after you submit the application and further after you're selected or admitted into your program?
Cool. Okay, so the process is really going to depend a lot on the school and even the subfield. And so I would say that the rest of the profs here can kind of chime in if there's something that I missed. But, and then in general, suitability. So the first question was about how is a suitable candidate determined. That will kind of be the same across most things. But I'll start with process first. So what I have experience in is, of course, Evo Anth, Evolution Anthropology at U of T. So I will be very kind of transparent about the process that we go through relating to kind of choosing candidates for our program. And then, as I said, other profs can just chime in terms of their subfields. So the first thing that we do is that each faculty member chooses students out of a pool of applicants. So they choose the students out of all the applicants that we get every year in terms of who they would like to supervise. So this means it's extremely important that supervisors know who you are at this point so that they can go and choose you out of the 100 applicants that we get for you know, masters or PhD or whatever. And yeah, and you know, as Andrew said earlier, reaching out like long before the application deadline to these supervisors is a key thing. Like, they need to know who you are. So once that list is collated, the second step is that all evolutionary anthropology faculty members will rank those applications. And then supervisors in those rankings, supervisors make the case or make the case for their students, for the students they want to supervise. So in that kind of process, we look at, of course, transcripts, but mostly with a focus on anthro grades. Like, we know as faculty that, you know, sometimes students end up in, you know, anthropology after they have, you know, dipped their toes into like math and physics. So we know that first year can be a little bit rough. So we do usually focus a lot on the anthro marks. We look at reference letters. We, as Andrew said, you know, a research statement that is really key for, and it's going to depend, right? It's going to shift based on what degree you are applying to. I would say MA is different from what is expected for an MSc. A PhD application or research statement is going to really differ from an MSc or an MA statement. So it really does depend on what degree you're applying to. I would say in the Evo subfield, we do require or expect a research proposal. Like, that's something that we do expect at a PhD level. So your research statement in that case would be kind of like a proposal. And we also look at your CV. So things like community engagement, you know, leadership roles, and especially independent research experience, like that is really highly ranked. So we look at your CV and we pick those things out. So gaining that independent research experience during your undergrad is really, can really make you stand out. And then fieldwork experience is also taken into account, especially for those applying to, let's say, the primatology stream or archaeology. So we do look at fieldwork experience. And yeah, and then once we have the ranked list, we then provide that ranked list to the department, who then tells us basically how many offers they can provide for that year. And this changes every year, and Esteban can maybe also speak to this. And you know, it depends on funding situations and various other things, the size of the cohort as it is currently, and a lot of different things. I also want to say here that U of T, we don't accept international students at a master's level, but we do accept a few international students at a PhD level. And yeah, so just kind of in that same vein, talking about international maybe experience or international students. So for those of you that want to go outside of the U of T system, which may be a little bit similar, so the U of T system can maybe be comparable to many Canadian universities and also some US institutions, and maybe others can talk about those experiences. But I, for example, went through the South African university system, which is similar to, I would say, a European university system, where you don't necessarily do any coursework in graduate school. So your entry into the department is mostly dependent on a specific project that you apply to work with a specific supervisor. So it's actually very different. The funding situation is also very, very different. And the time you have to complete your project or your thesis is also very different. So if any of you have questions relating to going outside of North America, I guess myself and Esteban can give you some advice. And then in terms of what happens after you get selected, first you get your offer letter, and then you can decide whether to go to that school or not. So it's really, if you get multiple offers, you weigh up funding packages. You also have a choice if you get funding, if you get multiple offers. And then if you choose to come to, for example, at U of T, you go to a bunch of orientation sessions, and then you choose courses with your supervisor. So courses that you will be taking, and you get TA assignments. Yeah, it's kind of, then you just have to take a lot of courses and read a lot. That's basically what I hear from all my students who go from undergrad to graduate school. They're like, wow, it's a lot of reading. So yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to chime in.
Yeah, Lauren, can I add something? So the one thing too is, depending what school you go to, you may have to deal with a GRE. So that's like an SAT. But some schools may have less teaching opportunities. So you might not even TA, but it might be more research driven. A lot of schools in the UK, for example, you finish earlier. This is for the PhD. You finish earlier and you have less teaching. Whereas usually in North America, there's more teaching opportunities. So we're going to be talking about research and teaching stream, I guess, and you could go the teaching route as well. So you kind of want to gauge all these different elements of what you want to do.
Yeah, that's a great point about the GRE.
I also add something. I go back to Andrew and Lauren, because they are totally right. Contacting faculty is really key. Not only because you will be on the radar of faculty, and this is important for acceptance into the program, but also because sometimes the faculty would be willing to help you with the statement, with your own statement. They will say, okay, this is what I'm working in, or would this be of your interest? And then you can come up with a statement together, bringing something that the student is interested, but also the faculty too. So this typically is helpful. Another thing that is important is that, for example, at U of T, we tend to have lots of courses. And this goes back to the comment by Lauren, where in some other schools and some, for example, other departments, I'm thinking about biology or chemistry, typically during your PhD, you will have to do a very limited number of courses. But in anthropology, there is quite a heavy course load. So you should be ready for that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for everyone's thoughts on. I've learned a lot. I didn't realize international students weren't admitted into the master's program here. Before Dr. Zoe has to leave, I do have a question for you about your experience with what kind of supports are available to graduate students, such as academic, social, career planning. What kind of supports are available?
Yeah, Bryn, I think I was glad to see that you guys asked that question, or someone asked that question. So I'm not gonna talk about financial supports, so other folks will talk about those. But so one of the things that I often tell people who are thinking of applying to graduate school is that nobody escapes unscathed. It is a very difficult process to go through, and different programs have different challenges. But it's hard. I mean, as Esteban was just saying, there's a lot of reading. It's a level up in many different ways from undergrad. It's almost like a different, species of thing, right? And so thinking about the kinds of supports that are available is really important because it is so difficult. So some of this ties into questions about financial supports, because of course, if you don't have adequate financial supports, then you're going to have to figure out where you're getting the funding, or are you taking out loans? And all of that adds to the stress and eats into the emotional resources, the time, the energy that you have to focus on your work, right? So these things are related. But as I was thinking about this, one of the things I was thinking of is, as you're researching a department, you want to try to get a sense of what kind of department it is for the students who are there, right? So not only what kinds of research is done there, but someone who I know describes there being reptilian programs and mammalian programs. So what kind of person are you? Do you want a kind of cold-blooded environment for yourself? Is that where you excel? Or do you want a more warm-blooded environment, right? Is that what you need? And one of the best ways to do that is to get in touch with current students or people who have recently come out of that program. And usually departments will have lists of graduate students on their website, and you can contact them. You can also contact, pretty much every department, in any North American program. I don't know if it would be the same in European programs, has some kind of graduate student union. And so there's usually a graduate student union that spreads across the whole university, but then there's subsections of that graduate student union for each department. So we have the Anthropology graduate student union, the AGSU. So you can usually find out the contact information for who the president or presidents or chairs of that are, and get in touch with those folks and just ask them some questions. What is it like? Do you feel supported? What's the general vibe? Are students complaining about things all the time? Do they feel like they're getting their needs met? And those graduate student unions are also one of the supports that you have, because part of what you do when you are in graduate school is you are participating in the creation of an intellectual community among your cohorts, right? So just as you guys are obviously some of the joiners for the undergraduate students, anthropology students at UTM, that becomes kind of incumbent on you even more, perhaps when you're a graduate student, to kind of create those forms of community. So it's good to know what's available in terms of kind of structures that already exist to help you feel like you're not on your own and like you're kind of part of a cohort. I think, there are also other structures within the university that can help you do that. So finding out if you're interested in, gender studies, often there's like, a very lively kind of intellectual, but also social community around women and gender studies. Or maybe there's, a kind of workshop series or a lecture series or that kind of thing. And so finding out what are your interests, and outside of the program that you're applying to, what are the other spaces of activity within the university that you might want to be involved in. I think, other things to think about are, this is a very basic one, but it really does matter. Where are you going to be, right? So hopefully by the time you guys are all ready to go to graduate school, you will be traveling to a place to do that degree in person. That, what are the costs of living in that city? If you are part of a religious community or part of a, an identity community of some sort, is that community there for you? So what is there going to be for you outside of your program? And it's really, I can remember when I was doing my PhD, I took Thursday nights off, which meant I worked every day and every night through the weekend, except for Thursday nights. And so, it's, that's not a model. I wouldn't advise doing that at all. But I wanted to know that on Thursday nights, there was something that I could do that would kind of nourish me. And often that had to do with feeding people and cooking for them and kind of getting together with them. So thinking about the, where you're going to be living and what outside of the university you can find. And then the other thing is about mentorship and professionalization. So, one of the obvious mentor relationships that you have is with the person who's your advisor or your supervisor, or potentially your committee members. But as you're going through this process of professionalization, there are within professional organizations, there are mentoring programs that you can get involved in. There are often opportunities for mentorship, kind of peer mentorship or mentorships through other informal channels within the university. And it's good to try and poke around a little bit and see what those are and really take advantage of them, because having a few, a kind of small stable of reliable mentors who may be at, you know, some of them may be peer mentors who are roughly the same stage as you. Some of them may be people who are, you know, full professors. Some of them may be people who are, you know, just a little bit ahead of you in the program. But I think those kinds of relationships are really important. And there are sometimes structured programs, often those exist through the professional organizations. So CASCA, the Canadian Anthropological Society, or the AAA, the American Anthropological Society, and its various subsections. But that's something that you can look for too, and can be really helpful, so that when you don't know how to do graduate school, right? You've never done it before. And so you will have a lot of questions along the way, and probably it's a very strange and kind of perverse environment, because you're supposed to be demonstrating your expertise and your authority and your knowledge, but also you're supposed to be developing that expertise and knowledge, right? And so sometimes it feels like, wait a minute, how am I here doing this? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And so making sure that you can cultivate some relationships where you can go and ask people without shame and embarrassment, you know, they talked about this person and I didn't know who it was, or I've been asked to write this kind of assignment and I don't know what the difference is between a paper and an essay. Is it the same thing? You know, these kinds of things is really important. And so, you know, I think overall there are some of these things that are sort of built in, and then also a lot of work that you kind of want to do on your own, which is good life skills anyway, to be like, what fills my bucket and where do I find it, right?
Exactly. It's like trying to build a balance between graduate school and studying and family and hit like work and stuff like that.
Hey,
So,
Bryn, can I add a point or two? And I think Steven also has something or two to add.
Yep.
The one thing is, I just want to keep reminding us, everything that Zoe said is awesome. I love the initial reptilian versus mammalian distinction. So funny. Anyway, but let's imagine, however, that there are also perhaps professional programs that people are going to be applying for. So nursing, law school, medical school, etc. And that there may be additional supports you'll want to look for there that are attached to career steps, right? So there might be really good internship placement, job placement kinds of opportunities. And if that's part of the goal and reason for going into that, then you'd want to look for that. That's the one thing that kind of popped in my head. And then maybe this is stealing Steven's point, and so I apologize in advance. Maybe it occurred to both of us. But even within, let's say, an anthropology department, you may find your community is very much based around the lab that you're going to be organized in. But if you don't do lab stuff, like myself and Zoe, when we went through graduate school, then you don't have that kind of community waiting for you, that is very much kind of either lab-based or supervisor and lab-based. And so then you have to do a little bit more of the work that Zoe mentioned. However, if you're going into a subfield where there is going to be lots of work in the lab or in the field, working with others on digs, etc., then that's going to be something that's both there as a support, but also it's going to be there as the inevitable community, which you're going to have to join. So doing some research beforehand on that group might be a good idea.
Yeah, I was just going to add to go back to what Zoe said, which is all great points, and this is actually linked to undergrad when they go in, and the number one thing that leads to success is support groups of students. That's like the number one thing. And I would say it's exactly the same in grad school, because you're working with your advisor and you have a relationship, and some supervisors have a closer relationship, others not so much. But you're not going to have the same conversations with peers and friends than with your supervisor. And that's so important. And then to link back a little bit to what Andrew said, if you're going into anthropology, a lot of discipline, a lot of departments, depending what discipline you go into, sociocultural, medical, evolutionary archaeology, there'll be different experiences. Some departments are very dominant towards one discipline. So the majority of students are going to be a particular subdiscipline. And so that, you know, recognize that as well. But the thing that, like, just personal experience, when you're going through a graduate program, you're going to have, it's an emotional roller coaster. Like, it's just all over the place. And to have a support group where you can be like, wow, today was just a terrible day. Like, I think I lost a week worth of writing. It just disappeared. I don't know why it didn't save. And you just open up and you just feel good because you know you're not the only one struggling. Because when you get in the program, it will seem like you're the only one struggling and everybody else has this, like, you know, armor on that they're just doing great. But when you talk to them, you find that majority of people are struggling. And that's okay. That's part of the development. So those support groups are so important. It's such an important thing to recognize.
Could I add something important? I mean, those are really, really important points. And I would like to mention that in some schools and some departments, including anthropology at U of T, you can go directly from undergraduate to the PhD. And some students would try to do this. Typically, it is a tremendous GPA is required. We're talking about something like 3.9 or 4. I like to just mention that this is always risky. My recommendation is for everyone to just go through a master's. And the reason for this is that, again, you just heard everything about support, about the challenges of a PhD program. We are talking about many years of commitment. I mean, the average time to completion in anthropology is between 6 and 7 years. So if you go directly from undergrad to a PhD program and you don't have particularly a lot of experience about what all research is all about and so forth, it can be really, really challenging. So my recommendation would be to just try to just go to a master's program, get the feeling of what research is all about. You can do an MA, and that's the typical route in sociocultural anthropology and in archaeology also sometimes, and even in evolutionary anthropology, or the MSc, which is 2 years instead of 1 year. But just do it so that you know what you will encounter, and then you can decide go to the PhD.
I would also, yeah, I think that's a great point. And another thing, depending on what program you're applying to, I'll also say I was offered direct admit from my undergrad to PhD program, and I didn't do it. I opted to do the master's first because I wasn't sure that I wanted to, you know, do this crazy thing we do. But the other thing is that sometimes when you, depending on the program you're applying to, you'll be a much stronger candidate if you maybe have taken a year off and gotten a bit more experience, maybe through an internship or just through kind of like being in the world in a different way that's geared toward the program you're interested in. I know that a lot of people are applying to master's programs right now because of the kind of global uncertainty, and it feels like that might be kind of a placeholder, you know, given, you know, unemployment rates and all kinds of things. But in general, I would say master's programs can do that, but also sometimes it's good, even if, particularly if it's a professional master's program, to think about, you know, can you get a little bit of experience under your belt first?
Awesome, great. Yeah, all of those thoughts are great about supports, experiences, and different pathways. I will have to say, I believe Dr. Will has to leave a little bit early today. So if you do have any questions for Dr. Will, we will be happy to pass them along to her. If you want to send them to Q&A Lily privately, and we'll pass them on. I will move on the moderation to our communications officer, Haley now. So yeah, you can take it away.
All right, so moving on to the next batch of questions. For Lauren, we have, how does one go about acquiring references? Do professors differ in how they approach and give references? Does the status of the professor giving the reference matter? And are tenure professors better references?
Okay, so different professors, they may have different protocols, but I generally think what I'm about to say and the process that I'm about to share is, I would say it's similar across many professors. So firstly, I would say that you need to make a formal request to the professor via email, and in non-COVID times, you know, probably preferably in person. I used to love, you know, when students email me and ask me for a meeting, and then they come to my office hours and we sit down and we have a, you know, nice chat about their plans for the future and things like that. I really love that. This year is a bit different, but you can still, you know, ask for a Zoom meeting. I would say that this is really important because I've had some students who have not asked me for reference letters, just added me as a reference in their master's or their PhD applications, and then I get like, you know, an automatic email from the school asking for a reference letter for this person. So I would say that is a no-go. Do not do that. Always formally ask for the reference. And I would say do it weeks or even sometimes months in advance. I have a student who's, I think she's even in this room. She asked me for a reference letter for next year. So this is good. It's a good thing. And then the second thing is that the professor needs to know you. So if you were just sitting at the back of the class, of the classes all semester long and never participated or came to office hours so they got to know you or anything like that, they're not going to have a lot to say in the letter, right? And this is, it's not going to, you know, you want the best reference letter. So I would say that definitely, you know, having the professor get to know you is a good way to get that. Third, I think this is common practice, but I always ask for a CV, an unofficial transcript. So it doesn't have to be an official one. You can just, you know, screenshot your transcript and send that. A research statement or a letter of intent, or the thing that you're going to be using for your application for graduate school. That always, you know, if after the kind of formal asking and formal discussion or meeting with the reference letter writer, if you send that along, they have a, you know, full picture of what you want to do, why you want to do it, and then they can, you know, write you a really good letter. And yeah, and then also send this, as I said, way in advance. So ask for the letter way in advance and send all the documents in advance so that the letter writer has time. And then finally, what's in the letter has to be true. So it's kind of up to the CV, to your CV and your transcript and your research statement, right? So the bottom line is that the letter is a testimonial that speaks to the student's academic ability, you know, character, and even leadership qualities. I always emphasize those in my letters. So make sure that, you know, this is all, you kind of ticked all the boxes so that the professor can actually like brag about you in the letter, right? So I would say that's for me, those are kind of good points to remember. And then I don't think there's a real difference between asking for a letter from a tenured versus non-tenured or any kind of professor, an LTA, Steven is, I mean, it doesn't really matter. As long as the professor knows you, I would say that is the most important point for sure. Yeah.
Can I add to that, Lauren? So two things. So this is coming from Ted Banning, who's a professor downtown at St. George. And he said that if you don't know the professor, but you did well in their course, you can make a meeting, you show your grades, you show an assignment, Like there's some students that I don't remember the student, but when I go back and they email me and I look and they have like a 90 in the course, and I'm like, oh, right, yeah, no, I remember that. And so it's not necessarily just about the personal relation, because you could have a great relationship with a professor, but the professor's not going to be able to say you're a top student if you're not doing well in the course. So you want to like, it is possible that the professor might not know you, but you show them like, I've done really well in your course, and they'll recognize that. Now, to go back to the last point about Lauren, so I've been told that it does matter if they are tenured. And I don't know, maybe Esteban can talk about that, because I've had a number of students who come to me and I would love to write them letters, but well, some of them are not even in anthropology. So they're asking like a pharmacy school, and I don't have any information about pharmacy. I can't tell if they're good in that. So you at least want to get in the department, I would say. But I'm wondering if like an associate or a tenured, when all else is equal, I think it matters more. But as Lauren was saying, you want somebody who can give you that reference to show that you're a good candidate, good student, good research abilities. So ideally, you want the best, a high tenure professor with a great relationship that you did really well in the course. It might not happen, but you can also balance it. You can try to get like a tenured professor, but get a real personable reference from, a lecturer or something like that. And then going back to what Andrew keeps linking to, if you're outside, so say you're doing a non-anthropology professional program, get a reference in the field. Like if you worked at a hospital or you worked at something, that's going to be a strong reference as well. And often in those cases, they may have like a master's or a PhD. So you kind of have to be strategic, I think, about how you're trying to get in. But maybe Esteban can clarify there, because I've been telling students to, go ask the tenured professors, and they're saying like, I hadn't had a tenured professor teach me. So yeah. Then.
I think this is a really difficult question. I have to say that the way the faculty in the selection process will read the letters will be different for each faculty. Everyone is different. Some faculty will not really care if the person signing is a tenure professor or doesn't have tenure. But going back to the point of Lauren, it is extremely important. I think if you have to choose between someone who has no tenure but really knows you very well versus another person with tenure who cannot say too many things about you, I just prefer the first option. So I think this is important. So also my recommendation is always try to get reference letters from advanced courses. The reason I'm saying this is when I teach a fourth-year course or a third-year course, I have written reports. I just have oral presentations. I know students because the classes are small. And I also have second-year courses where I have 150 students, 175 students, and I cannot do the same thing in second-year courses. And quite often I'm asked, could you write a reference letter for me? I was in your second-year course. And my answer will always be, I don't mind doing this if you really want to do it, but my recommendation is for you to just go talk to a professor from an upper level course who will be able to say many more things that I can say, about you based on this course. So this is very important. Yeah.
If I could just chime in on that, I think there's a consensus emerging, which is strategic and balance is good. So but I also wanted to just add one more detail, which is it also depends on the program you're applying for. So if you're applying from undergraduate into an MA or to a PhD, but that your experience before you transition is undergraduate, then I think a good mix is fine. Untenured, teaching stream, if they know you well and if you did well in their class and they can speak well to your abilities, that's great. And having a mix is also fine. If, however, you're applying from an MA program into a PhD program, then there might be a little bit more weight given to whether the faculty member that's writing the reference is, a kind of more senior person versus a more junior person. There, however, I would still also recommend a balance, but you'd probably at least want one that was from a tenured faculty member. Obviously, probably your supervisor takes care of that, and you've got that checked off. But that's one other thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention that I think Lauren probably just assumed, but is tell us how to send your reference. Sometimes it's just like, can you write me a reference? And you're like, sure. What do I do? Where does it go? How do I get it there? These days, it's often it's automatic. You say, I'll write it, and then the student puts your name into the system, and you get an automatic invitation on how to upload it, etc. But that's not always the case. So be sure to follow up. I just put your name down. Did you get this, this invitation to submit your letter? It is I can just speak from personal experience. When students follow up, sometimes those are actually really useful reminders of something that I may have, if not forgotten, then not remembered exactly correctly. So helping the professor who's writing the letter with all the information they need to do it is a great strategy.
All right, does anyone else have anything to add? Okay, next question. This one's for Steven. How should a student approach a potential master's supervisor? How much should a student's topic of interest align or overlap with their professor's topic of interest?
Okay, so Andrew touched on this a little bit already. There's a couple of things I can kind of add, I guess. Okay, so I got some, okay, first of all, the key element is you need to find something that interests you. If you're doing it for 2 years, you're doing it for 7 years, if you're not interested in the topic, it is not gonna go well. Like, I would say like the support groups are important, but if you don't have a passion driving your research, if you hate doing your research, it's not gonna go well. So you wanna make sure you know what you wanna do. The second thing, okay, so again, this kind of goes back a little bit of repetition of what Andrew said. Are you wanting to stay in a region? Are you wanting to stay in Canada? You want to go to the US? You want to go to Europe? Do you want to really go to a school and then you'll kind of cater your research to that? That's a little bit more risky because you may put yourself in a position that the faculty just might not be interested in what you're interested in. So you want to look at that. You want to, in archaeology, for example, it's often a regional thing. So like I work in Ontario, I need an archaeologist professor who works in Ontario, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a methodological connection, theoretical connection. For example, part of my work is I do experimental archaeology. That's a very methodological driven way of doing archaeology. I have colleagues who their research is linked to a methodological connection to the supervisor, but not the regional. And part of that is when you go into the program for a PhD, you get a committee, and your committee is going to help you through that process. So you need to have some kind of link. Archaeology is traditionally regional. I'm assuming sociocultural, it's a regional thing, maybe, kind of, I don't know. But there has to be some connection because it really, like, you're going to need your supervisor to help you through the process. And if your supervisor can't help you, then and they'll tell you, they'll say like, I can't help you with this. I'm not going to be able to help you, and you're not going to do good research because you're just not going to have any guidance. So that's really important that there's some connection where they can help in some regard. And if they can't directly help, that there's other people or resources available. What I did is I looked at, I wanted to stay in Canada, and I basically was like archaeology graduate programs, Canada. And I just looked through department websites, looked at research interests, saw, what was interesting. And then I sent an email, I met with them. And it started out so this is Dave Smith, he was my supervisor, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to look at pottery in Ontario. And he's like, okay, that's kind of broad. What kind of pottery? And I was like, I don't know, the cool kind. I actually said that because I don't even know. Like I framed my whole undergraduate experience through late Bronze Age archaeology. I was going to do ancient Greece and all this, but I sucked at the language. And I was like, okay, I'm going to pivot into a different direction. And so you have that discussion with your supervisor, and then like as again Andrew said and Esteban, like if they want you, they'll help you. Like it's kind of like a team project. So then you go back and forth and you're developing your application. But if you don't have a connection to it, they're not going to be able to help you. And it's possible they may like, okay, well, I'll be able to take you on. And then if you're really independent and you think you can just drive it yourself and you don't need a lot of help, then you could do that. But you want to gauge it. And this is, again, ongoing theme of everybody here and what Andrew's saying is like, you want to gauge it to what your research interests are and how you want to have that graduate experience. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all for there.
Could I add one or two really quick points? Those are all really good. And I just want to expand on one thing that Zoe mentioned after my initial comments at the very beginning, which is it is possible that sometimes your hoped for supervisor, planned on supervisor will in fact not stay your supervisor, because sometimes career trajectories don't align, their health issues come up, etc. So it might be good, especially for a PhD program, maybe a little bit less so for an MA, that you might want to know whether there's another person at that department that would also be, interesting for your research. And then programs sometimes. So when I applied to my PhD for a PhD, I applied to a couple of places because of people who were there and a couple of places because the programs had good reputation. And I only got into 2 places, and one of them was very gung-ho, and that's where I ended up going. But it wasn't for any one particular person. It was really the reputation of the program. Whereas the other place that admitted me was very kind of lukewarm about their acceptance. And I really wanted to go there for one person. And I later found out that the reason they were tepid was because he was tepid, and that was because he left that year to go to another institution, right? So it's just to say that these things, as much as you do the work, and it's invaluable to do the work of aligning, selecting a supervisor, imagining that, it is also good to kind of have being alert to kind of other things that are going on there. And maybe we haven't said, it hasn't come out yet anywhere else. And I'll just say that I don't recommend one-year MA programs. I know this isn't like maybe like the topic as such, but I just wanted to get it in there because it came out before. And this is the terrible thing maybe to say, because U of T, like, we offer a one-year MA program, but I am somebody who, unless you know exactly what you want to do and you're like laser focused, and it's, then I imagine a 2-year program to be much more valuable at the MA level. And it's a terrible, weird thing to say, but I wouldn't recommend a 1 year. It's a very particular person that wants it. Has nothing to do with supervisors, sorry, but I just wanted to drop it in, sorry.
So just to go to a point that Andrew said, you do want to balance, because like, yeah, exactly. Prestige is a big part, but you also want to have, maybe you want to work with a really good, or you just have really strongly adamant about working with one researcher, but also funding plays a part too. And it's possible that you could be going to a university that maybe isn't as ranked well, but you're going to get a lot more funding. Or you might go to a really prestigious one that has no funding. Especially if you're going overseas, you might have to find your own funding. So these are all things you want to consider. And I think, to go back to what Andrew was saying about the 1-year MA, and also a link to what Esteban was saying, like, you definitely need to do a master's before you do a PhD. And like, I've talked to people who've done the right into the program, and it's like getting thrown into a shark tank. It's really intense. And a number of people that do the MA, they often don't even stay in the academic stream. So I guess the one benefit of the 1-year MA is you kind of do it and then you move on either to do a professional route. You're going either consulting, or maybe you're getting another degree, or that route as well. But again, it's kind of like the theme is like, what caters well to how you see your path develop? Do you want to go into museums? Do you want to go into non-for-profit? Do you want to go into consulting? And then kind of cater it into that direction. Because if you get this stuff, if you know what you want to do early on, then you can really, like for museum, for example, you can volunteer, get an internship at a museum. And then when you apply for jobs later on, you have all this other experience on top of the master's and all that. So these are all things you want to consider.
All right, good advice. Next question for Esteban. What type of funding is available for students, whether it's government aid, university grants, bursaries, or even through their professor? How would they apply and access this funding?
Okay, so this is a really important, of course, topic, funding, tremendously important. So I'm going to try to just describe what happens at U of T, and you're going to see in North America that is going to be very similar. With respect to Europe, the situation is different, as Steven was saying. Maybe Steven can just provide more insights, but I'm going to tell you what happens at U of T as an example. And I think this will be transferable to other schools in Canada and also in North America. So we do offer what is called guaranteed funding. So if you are accepted to the MA, you will get funding for 1 year. If you are accepted to the PhD, you will be funded for 4 years, or if you are direct entry, you will be funded for 5 years. So this is good. The way it works is you will get 18,000 right now. In 2020, I think 21, I believe, is $18,000 Canadian dollars plus tuition, plus I think it's benefits. So this is it. I have to say, and I have to be totally honest about this, $18,000 is not too much for living in Toronto, as you all know. Toronto or the GTA is a very expensive place. So $18,000 is not really a huge amount. Of these $18,000, around 8,000 of those dollars you will have to do as TAs. So as part of your package, you will have to give around maybe 175 hours of TA work. So you will be TAs of undergraduate courses, and this is part of the package. So this is the brief description of the guaranteed funding package. Of course, as part of this package, the department will ask all students to be applying for external funding. So the department will say, okay, we're going to just give you funding for 4 or 5 years, but we will ask you to apply for external funding. So you will be asked to apply either for the CIHR, which is the health, the major tri-council agency for health, if you do work related to health, or SHERC, if you are in sociocultural anthropology or in many cases archaeology, so in the social sciences and humanities, or NSERC, if you are in biological anthropology or sometimes archaeology, or the Ontario Graduate Scholarship. So the department expects everyone in the program to apply. And if you get those grants, that's very good, because obviously you will get a really good income, and the department will provide a top up. Those are quite competitive, fellowships. And if you don't get them, I mean, you apply. If you don't get them, you will know that at least you will just have your guaranteed funding after, for 4 or 5 years. After that, it's a different story. After that, typically the income will be through TA-ships. You will still have the opportunity to do TA-ships, and that's how your income will be coming. And sometimes I have to say that depending on the field, but the minimum number of hours that we have to guarantee right now for the TA-ships is 170 or 75, but many students will get many more than that, because there is a lot of demand for courses, for having TAs to help. So some students may have more than 200, 250, even sometimes 300 hours. and the rate per hour is pretty good. It's around $47 to $48. So again, this is an important component. So this is the summary of what is happening here in terms of the funding. I don't know if someone wants to add.
I would like to add at least just one or two more things. Just
Sure.
again, I hate to be the person that keeps bringing it back to this, but for those students who are applying to non-anthropology programs, it's going to look very different. My sense is that what Esteban is talking about probably applies across the board to social science programs. I think when it comes to maybe the natural or biological sciences, then your funding might be coming from a giant grant that a professor supervisor has, which is again a distinct, that'll still be funneled through the department the way it funds its students, but that's another thing to know about. And then for professional programs, there's very little financial support except for certain kinds of scholarships that you will of course want to ask about and inform yourself about, but there is this kind of expectation if you're applying to law school, if you're applying to a nursing program, that you are going to pay your way, and that's probably going to be loans. And that's just kind of like the deal that's understood. I don't know if anyone has anything to add on that point, but just to kind of alert you that professional programs don't work in the way that Esteban just discussed.
Also, there's some master's programs in the US. So graduate school actually in the US is more like, it's like the master's and the PhD are kind of all together in a way. But there are some master's programs that don't offer any funding. So there's a lot of master's programs that are like self-funded in the US.
Yeah, Andrew was totally right. I was primarily referring to academic programs. Sometimes in Canada, even it depends. For example, in anthropology, faculty also have to put a little bit of funding to support students, and this is called RA-ship funding, so research assistantship funding. But we only need to provide around $1,000. So our department, for example, have been providing this funding for the faculty. But for example, if you go to biology or chemistry or engineering, you may get also guaranteed funding, but you will not know this, but maybe faculty will have to pay much more than we do pay, for example, in anthropology. They will have to come up with a higher amount to support the students. So again, the situation is quite different depending on the department.
And maybe one last thing is, and this is just speaking from personal experience, oftentimes the students that are looking or have looked to me to be potential supervisors and ask about a program, I can tell you a lot of things about a program, but there's certain details I don't know about, and funding is often one of them. And so you often will need to inform yourself about potential programs, maybe through a potential supervisor, but you may need to go somewhere else in that program or in that department to find out about funding.
Oh, one thing that just to finish, which is very, very important for those of you interested in going to the Masters of Science, for example, in our department, and this is unfortunate, but it's the way it is, the second year of the program is not funded. So only the first year is funded. So if you do the MA for 1 year, you will get funding. If you do the MSc, you will get funding for the first year, but not for the second. So in the second year, typically, if you can get TA ships, you will get some income, but otherwise it's not going to be the same as the first.
One thing to add too, Esteban, is like, I don't know how it is at other universities, but at University of Toronto, there's a lot of internal funding, grants, scholarships, bursaries, like, you know, $2,000, $3,000, $1,500. And that stuff adds up, right? And like when you're living in Toronto and you get $3,000, that's a couple months of rent. So, you know, that helps you. But like, there's a long list of these admission grants. Like I got one, it was a Northern Ontario bursary, like just graduate student in Northern Ontario. I think it was like me and 5 other people. There's many options to help kind of supplement. And then when you kind of look at it and you kind of lump it all together, it starts to add up a little bit. And I would recommend, if you do the Masters of Science, look at it like you're getting like $9,000 per year. Like you really have to budget for 2 years. Like it's tough, but you kind of like, you got to figure that out. And if you, with all funding planning, if you plan early, then at least when you get to know money, you're kind of had an idea of how you're going to potentially find more money. If you just kind of like go by the seat of your pants, it's going to be a disaster. I think that's just a theme, anything with all this, like plan out what you want to do. You can change the plan, you can be flexible, but you want to have that planned out, because the last thing you want is to not be able to pay rent and get evicted. Like you're already dealing with the stress of grad school. The last thing you need is not have a place to stay. So
yeah, going back to Steven's point, I agree that in fact there are many opportunities for smaller grants, and I have to say that the graduate program in general is really supportive. And for example, they will provide funding for your pilot research when you have to go to do field work outside in sociocultural anthropology or in archaeology. They will provide $3,000 to $4,000 so that you can just go abroad to do your field work. Also, there is annual funding for going to conferences, which is really important for any graduate student. So for conferences, you will just get maybe funding to cover your trip. So there are many small fellowships, as Steven was saying, for $1,000, $2,000 that you can apply for.
All right, now bringing it back to Steven. What is the relationship between a student and a supervisor like? What should a student expect from the professor? What is the professor expecting from the student? And what happens if you do not get along?
okay, that is such a large question.
I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, no, not the question is a good question. I'm just like, there's so much to unpack there. The number one thing is communication, early communication. Okay. So you have to know what kind of student are you like? Do you need to be pushed? Do you need to kind of just need someone to facilitate you? Do you need someone to just chat with? Like what role do you want your supervisor to fill? If you talk to your supervisor and your supervisor's like, when you're trying to find the supervisor and they're like, I expect you to show up to lab every week. I expect you to do this. I expect you to finish your PhD in 4 years, and you can't do that, then you're probably not going to get along with your supervisor. Now, if the other side is, yeah, I may be in my office, I'll see you next month, and it's like, you don't see him for a year, that might not also be good. So I would say, like in my experience, what I did is I didn't need someone to motivate me. I just needed someone there. So I often went into Dave's office, I talked to him, bounced ideas off of, but I didn't need someone to tell me, you have to submit this, you have to submit this, because that's just stress I don't want to deal with. I don't need that. So you want to figure out that balance and the communication, and it's like constant communication, because when things start to go down, if you don't say anything, they might not know that you're struggling, because they're very busy, they're doing everything, they have other grad students, but at the same time there might just be a disconnect. So get that early on. If you feel there's a conflict, address it. And I don't think you need to worry, like if you feel they're not doing something, I think if you talk to them in a reasonable way, then you'll be able to have a dialogue. Now, I have colleagues who love their supervisors. I have colleagues who hate their supervisors. I have colleagues who switch supervisors. You can switch supervisors. Again, sometimes the way the project's set up or just the relationship, something doesn't work. There are avenues in which you can transfer. And like, I guess when you apply for other things, they might ask, well, what happened? And you just have to come up with an answer. And you can say something like, our interests just didn't align, and we felt best it would be if I moved on with somebody else, or something along those lines. But you can shift. That opportunity is there. You're not like, it's not like you're stuck in a contract that you can't get out of. But the key element is like, you have to communicate with them. And like, you can't be afraid. You can't see them as like, oh, I'm bothering you. Like, oh, I don't want to bother you. I'm not going to, no. They're your supervisor. You email them. If they don't respond, you email them. If they don't respond, you go to their office. Like, that is their role. That is what they are meant to do. And if they have an issue with that, and you're having communication issues right off the bat, then that's probably a good sign that maybe there's a serious issue. I think in some cases, department chairs have stepped in if it's not working. But I think at that point, it's almost like more likely there's going to be a transfer because it's just not going to work out. But I would say, like I said, I had a great relationship with my supervisor because we had the same expectation. We knew what we wanted. What I needed, he provided. Like some are just the small things, like getting reference letters in on time, like just little things like that, getting things signed on time. Those are like things you just don't even have to worry about. So even like make sure, don't be afraid to email your prof. I email Dave all the time. And what he'd say, be like, oh yeah, I got your emails. I'm just going through them. Like, and so that's just an element there. And I think like it comes, you can either, if you really want to go to the program and you want to like, I want to be in this school, in this program, then you can have that talk after, once you're in the program, and figure out what the best avenue is. Time management, figure out a plan, figure out a 5-year plan, figure out when you want to do a proposal, when you want to get, when you're going to start working, like I'm talking about U of T, like when are you going to start with your MRP? Are you going to do the coursework first? How many courses are you going to take? What courses are you going to take? Like they're supervisors, they're mentors. I know there's some faculty that think it's better to have a hands-off approach and we're not supposed to hold your hand. But they're mentors, that's their job. It's like in the title of the job. So use them. And all I can say is just communication. That's probably the key element. If they don't know what's going on, because you might be struggling, you might be dealing with mental health, anxiety, and you're freaking out and you're not telling them and they don't know, they're assuming that you're doing fine. And then what happens is you go so far down and it sometimes it's hard to get back up. So you want to have that communication. And if the supervisor is, if they don't respect that, then I think you have a serious issue. And I think you probably need to go to the department chair. If your supervisor is not recognizing that you have like, severe mental health issues, that's not good at all. And that's a whole broader systemic problem of university in general. But I think you need to have that communication and have an expectation of what both of you are going to do and what both of you are going to provide and how you're going to do it. Like if you ask all these things on the supervisor and then the supervisor's like, hey, I want the proposal here, this, and you don't provide any of that, like how's chapter 1 going? Oh, it's not done yet. Okay, well, you said it was going to be done. Well, I'm still, like it goes two ways. So you got to provide those expectations, just like how when they provide back to you. So I hope that helps. I think it really comes down to like, some people are more easygoing. Some people, really need to have that communication. And you can kind of gauge with your supervisor how your relationship's going to be. Does it seem very formal? Does it seem like you go in the office, you have a 10-minute spot and then you're kicked out and then you return, in 3 weeks? Or does it seem more like they are a little more friendly and they're asking how your life is? They're not asking just how your research is going. They're asking, how are you as a person doing? Like these are things that you want to address early on.
Yeah, if I could just jump in with just one more thing. I think everything, really the starting and the end point of what Steven said is absolutely right. It's about communication. And different supervisors are going to be able to give you different kinds of support. If you're looking to a supervisor for emotional support, there are some that's just not what they're going to offer you. That's just not their way they imagine the mentor-mentee relationship, and you need to go elsewhere to find it. But the one thing that I want to bring up is something that hasn't quite been addressed yet, and it does happen, and it's unfortunate, and that is that the relationship can also be sometimes exploitative.
Yeah, that's a great point, Andrew.
Supervisors can ask students to do things that they shouldn't be doing. They shouldn't be asking students to do. When I was in graduate school, I knew of one professor who asked her students to do everything from, pick up dry cleaning, to, house sitting, to take my car to the mechanic. Really stuff that, they shouldn't have been asking them to do. And even within, let's say, like that's kind of maybe an extreme example, There's other, possibilities that there could also be kind of inappropriate advances made, between students and supervisors, of a sexual or other kind of nature. It does happen, unfortunately, but you need to kind of be wide-eyed and alert to those kinds of things. And if anything strikes you as inappropriate, then you should also be looking for supports on how you might be able to address that. Maybe it's something as simple as a kind of correction, like, I don't feel too comfortable with that. And some supervisors may, be okay with hearing that. Others might not. And then you want to have established already kind of early on that this is happening and it's something that you feel comfortable with. So that's not to say that that should occupy your thought too much, but it is, as we're imagining relationships and managing them from both sides, it's just to be kind of clear-eyed about that. It's very delicate on a variety of fronts, and most of these situations are not problematic, but some of them are, and it's just good to kind of be alert to, establish early on communication. It helps you in that regard.
Yeah, if I can say something, I think it's really important, the points that Andrew is making. And I would like everyone to know also that there are resources that you can go to. For example, in our department, in our graduate department, that's the role of the graduate coordinator. There is specifically a person who is the graduate coordinator who will be the contact person when any of these things are happening. And when the relationship with the supervisor is not working, or any of the issues that Andrew was mentioning there. So typically when there is a problem, the person to go would be the graduate coordinator, and through the graduate coordinator, these problems are solved. So, but it's important that you know that there is support for this. Yeah, Lauren?
So I also wanted to say that sometimes your supervisor is not, or some supervisors are not necessarily going to be your mentors. So there's also that. I was lucky enough to have a supervisor who was also my mentor. She got me through tough times, not just research, but also life wise. But I would say that, if your supervisor is, let's say, not a bad person or anything, but it is not expecting to be there for like some kind of emotional support, but you really need that, but you also really like them in terms of, them giving you good advice in terms of for your research, then, there are other people in the department, like U of T, Anthropology, if you are considering coming here. It's a huge department. We have so many faculty members. There are postdocs as well. And your mentor doesn't have to be your supervisor. So I would say that of course, if there are like really bad issues, as Esteban said, there's a person that you can go to. But if you really still want to keep your supervisor, but would like some extra support, then there are other people that you can definitely reach out to. I feel like I mentor multiple grad students that are not mine, and it's fine. so yeah.
I think one thing to add too is it's possible, like, again, it comes down to what is important for you. If you want to do ongoing research, if you want a field site where you can join, there's some professors who have ongoing field projects, and others are doing more like collection analysis, where you're not going to be going to do an excavation. I'm talking about archaeology specifically. So that's an element too. And it's possible that the professor might not be a good mentor and might not provide good emotional support, but they might be like an excellent professional academic network, because they can attach you to the right people. They're involving you in the collaborative process. They're trying to publish with you. So like, I think sometimes a small discussion with a supervisor may address what may seem like a big issue. because it might just be a miscommunication. And that's often something that like, it doesn't have to go, because I think the way I'm coming off is like, if you have a problem with your supervisor, get rid of them, get a new one. Like, no, have that communication. It could just be a very small miscommunication and then you move forward.
Yeah.
So there's a professional relationship. Like they're not gonna, it's not a grudge. They're not gonna have a grudge against you. You have to, there's a professionalism there that's going to be recognized.
I would like to highlight one of the things that Lauren was saying, and I think this is really important. It is quite often in our department, in fact, in particular, I have to say in sociocultural anthropology, that there are two supervisors. So you will have no one, but two supervisors. So this is good, really excellent, because I mean, there will be two different persons, and if some person is not a good mentor, maybe the other will be. And also, even if you only have one supervisor, after the second year of your PhD, you will, after you defend your proposal, there will be a core committee. And the core committee will be including your supervisor and two additional faculty. And they will be following up all the research that you do until the big day, which is when you defend and then you leave with a PhD. So the core committee will be there to help you. It's not only your supervisor, but also the other two people there, and they will be a really good resource for you. So yeah, that goes back to the point of Lauren. It's true, we're a huge department. We are 60 faculty, I believe, right now.
Okay, now one last question before we get into the open Q&A, and this is directed to everyone. What are some expectations for after you finish a master's/PhD? What are some potential avenues students can explore within and without academia?
I'd be happy to start with just one core point, and then I am happy to yield. But the core point is that you should go in with being, especially nowadays, imagining multiple pathways out of your program. So that is, imagine, and if you are someone who just loves the academic life and would just love to be part of it, for your career, definitely have that as one of your pathways, but do not have it as your only pathway, because the competition is fierce for those positions. And I feel like right now the university and academia is changing underneath our feet as we speak. And we don't know what that's going to mean. In Ontario, the last 20 years have been ones of expansion and expansion and expansion. And we may see things shifting. That's all to say, if academia is like one of your top kind of job desires, then by all means go for it. But you should start from a starting point, imagine and craft your graduate career such that it would facilitate other career paths. And it's just going to be so much better for you in so many other ways if you're able to do that. And I'll even say that even if you do stay in academia, having imagined and maybe even crafted the possibility of other career paths will help you to advise your own students on how they might do that. So that is just to say, imagine multiple career paths. And then an addendum to that is your professors or your supervisors may not be the people to help you do that. Because what do we know really well? We know academia. What do we not know really well? Everything else. I mean, it's an overstatement, but really, you may look to career services, you may look to other people at the university who have experience outside the university, alumni association networks, etc., who can help you imagine multiple career paths, and there are many of them out there. We as a department, I know, are working, I know that the Anthropology Society is working on inviting graduates in who have experience beyond the academy. I think that should be kind of like at least a couple of times a semester that should happen. I know it's a lot of work to do that. Also to educate faculty so that we can then help our students. But it's just to say, again, kind of main point, imagine multiple pathways. Your professors might be able to help you to do that. but you may need to look elsewhere to imagine how you might do that. And I had my graduate students, when they started to write down a kind of list of what's my skill set now, what's it good for, and then after the first year to revise that list, what's my skill set now after my first year, what is it good for? And what you'll realize in doing that is that your skill set is good for a lot of things within, but also beyond the academy. So that's kind of my little
just to add on to what Andrew said, I think that's an extremely important point. Gaining transferable skills and like seizing the opportunities for professional development and other skills building that are available to you through a graduate program, it's super important. Like, for example, I have a grad student who just completed a workshop on, I think it was academic speaking and writing. And that happened through the U of T SGS. And that's gonna, of course, help him if he stays in academia. If he doesn't, it will help him beyond. If you want to stay in academia, also, I would say broaden your training. That's also a good piece of advice. So, for example, this is specific to my field, but I encourage my students who want to stay in academia to take an anatomy course, because that completely opens up the jobs that are available to them once they are done with their PhD. So there's lots of anatomy jobs. There are not that many biological anthropology jobs. So just in terms of broadening your training, your academic training is also an important point.
I think to add to what Andrew was saying, like a lot of, for example, we had the professionalization event with UTMAS like last month, and some of the people, they're friends of mine, but I didn't know what they were doing. And LinkedIn and Amanda Sinclair, who was one of our speakers, like she always emphasizes, get a LinkedIn account. And like my account itself is not really that useful, but seeing what everybody else was doing, because you can do CRM, you can do contract archaeology. If you're doing archaeology, you can do consulting, you can work for non-for-profits. And sometimes you just need, like, you find a friend who's working there, and then they maybe provide you some avenue, and then you go that route. So like Andrew said, I think you got to figure out kind of what you're going to do. Like I have a 5-year plan. After a certain time, it's like, okay, I gotta get a job outside. Like I gotta get a job. But at the same time, you kind of want to, like, I'm trying to develop my projects with no money, but I'm creating networks. I'm talking to people. I'm developing collaborations, and I'm developing these avenues. And then if you get a job, I think a big part of that too is you get consulting or contract, or maybe even you do you teach an online course. All that's going to help you. And maybe you don't even want to be, maybe you think you want to teach, but you actually don't like teaching. And I have colleagues who they're like, I want to be a professor. And then they teach like, I hate this. I want to go into consulting. So the thing is sometimes you want to get exposed to it at a low risk, where, if you don't do well and you get terrible course evaluations and you don't do at all, then it's a one-off and you carry on. And as Lauren was saying, like, develop skills. Like I tried to start learning how to use R. It didn't go that well. I started and failed, but I was like, okay, I'm probably going to need these skills. Look at the types of jobs you might be interested in. Look at what skills they're using. Some of them might be soft skills, but other ones might be like actual software, program, methodological skills that you can start to develop now. And the career center, any workshop, all these things are going to demonstrate to an employer or to, if you go academic or professionalization, that like you're committed to professional development, which tells a lot about your character. And I think it kind of goes back even when you apply for grad school, like if you're trying to get better and you're doing these this extracurricular, but also professional development, skills development, it shows initiative. And that puts you, that gives you something when you apply for jobs. So you got to balance it. Like Andrew said, you can go down that route. You could try, that's what I'm doing right now. But you have to have a plan B and prepare, be flexible. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because when you're applying for jobs, it is soul crushing, because you think you're like, oh, this is the perfect job. I know I'm going to get it. And you don't get it. And you're like, oh, I'm terrible. And you have to lose that mentality. You have to kind of be like, I'm applying for this job. I don't get it. I move on to the next one. Because it is like applying for jobs in itself becomes a job, especially academic jobs, because you're not just submitting a resume. You're doing your CV, statement of research, a teaching dossier, which, some of you probably don't even know what that is. Like, a lot of work goes into it. So give yourself time. And also, if you can, take a break, relax, like actually I took a break after my undergrad before I went to the master's, and it was great. I worked for my parents in a bookkeeping. I hated it, but I was like, now I know this is something I don't want to do. I don't want to work in an office job. I made a little bit of money. I was able to gather my thoughts, regenerate, develop my graduate application, and see if I really wanted to go back. Because I think that's the thing too, is you leave, maybe you don't want to go back. Maybe you're quite happy going down another avenue. And with that, like, a big thing that I think a stigma that graduate students are only, we're dealing with is like, if you don't go into academia, you're not a failure. Like, just the numbers are not the same, but a lot of students have this internal, like, they feel they didn't do well. And that's just, you can't do that. You're gonna drain your energy before you even start. Like, think of it like you apply for it, you develop these skills, you develop these networks, and you prepare yourself for various avenues. Like Andrew said, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because it's stressful. Reduce stress if you can.
And I'll just say maybe one more thing. Sometimes it is just a matter of shifting your thinking about what it is that you're learning in graduate school.
Yeah.
I remember for a while, I would say, write down your skills for me. The graduates said, I don't know what I know. And I said, well, if you're doing a PhD, then you have skills in research development, research management, research mobilization, research communication. You can do an impact assessment because you've read a literature and you know what works. You're a writer, you're a networker, if you've gone to conferences. Like, these are skills that come with just doing the PhD. And you just got to be able to kind of recognize it and articulate it. And usually when I kind of tell students this, they're like, oh yeah, I can do all of that stuff. So sometimes it's just a matter of having a running narrative of the skills that you have and what they're good for, and finding a language that allows you to do that.
Yeah, just really briefly, I agree with it, Andrew, totally, that you will just be gaining lots of skills. Also, as you go through the PhD, you will be, getting more and more professionalization skills. For example, in the graduate program, there are lots of seminars that are just devoted to this during the PhD program. But I think it's also true that you need to be realistic. And the reality, particularly the current reality, is that if you want to go, in terms of the academic world, is going to be extremely, extremely competitive. I can tell you that when we do searches for faculty positions, for tenure track faculty positions, we have quite often like 70, 80 applicants for a single position. So this will give you an idea on how competitive it's out there in terms of finding a job in academia. Of course, there are other options. You could just also get a position of sessional instructor, for example. But yeah, it's very competitive.
Okay, and now I would like to pass over my moderating position to Lily, so she can answer the open Q&A.
Okay, so the questions are for all the professors. I have several of them, so it's okay if people possibly stay a little bit longer just to answer them, because we only have 3 minutes left. If not, we will be recording, so you can come back and watch it if you have to leave. Okay, so the first question I have are there any considerations when applying to graduate school as a student with a learning disability?
Yeah, I think there will be considerations in the same way as in the undergraduate program. This is something that is really important to discuss with the, for example, the faculty teaching the graduate courses and with supervisors, but there will be always, of course, accommodation too in the graduate program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an accessibility that you deal with at UTM. There's also an SGS level, the same. So
I might also add that it's probably, I don't know, Esteban, I would like to hear maybe your thoughts on this, or anyone else has experience. I do wonder whether students risk anything when they contact a supervisor to reveal a disability before being accepted into a program, whether that's a risk or not. I'd like to think that it's not, and that one should be upfront with a potential supervisor about accommodations that may be necessary. But part of me also realizes that that may not always be the smartest move. I'm actually not quite sure how I feel about that. Can you think of any either examples or what your sense is about how to kind of go about that? Thinking that it might be something more than just the kind of typical accommodations that we make in our courses, but something maybe even more significant than that.
I mean, again, I think transparency is the key in this respect. So, I mean, this is my personal view. It's always important to just discuss this. And, you know, if it is during the application process, that's fine. I can tell you personally, on a personal level, I have a student with a severe Mendelian condition. I mean, it's cystic fibrosis. That's a really quite a severe condition. And he has been in the master's program. It's taking longer, but you know, I think I was aware of this when he applied. He was totally transparent about that, and he mentioned that he had this condition. But he's really he was really excited about the master's program, and we have done the best we can. And I have to say, not only myself, but the graduate program as a whole. All the faculty teaching courses have given this student the possibility of you know, extra time for the assignments. So this has been my experience. Yeah, but in this respect, I can primarily speak, you know, from myself. I don't know if, you know, there may be other cases that are different.
The one thing I'm thinking is, because also when you're applying to a program, like if you apply to U of T, you're to get into the Department of Anthropology, but you're also part of the School of Graduate Studies. And so they have policy for accommodations that if supervisors aren't meeting, then just like, you know, like with student accommodations, like if the accommodations aren't being met, then there's avenues in which to address that. But like talking to colleagues and I am not aware of any supervisors who are not providing accommodations. But like Andrew said, I think like some supervisors and some professors you think are nice people, and they just have a different way of looking at things. So I think with those kind of questions, you can go to the university, because that is a university resource there that they can provide. It's beyond just the department.
Okay, the next question I have is, how would we find out how many grad students each professor of a facility is taking? Is it just best to email them and ask one directly?
I would say
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because some professors put their information on the website, but a number of don't. So that's just a simple thing you can ask.
Okay, the next question I have is, as Dr. Schroeder said, anthropology grad programs mainly look at anthropology grades. Do they look at overall averages for these courses, or would, for example, a lower grade affect your application?
I think you can correct me, Esteban, but they take the last, it's maybe 6 credits or something like that, and then put together a CGPA of those, and that's what we get.
But I have to say that, I mean, also we have to be realistic. Your entire transcript is important, and we of course check the entire transcript. So we are aware that, as Lauren was saying, that many students struggle in the first year or in the second year, and quite often, and we all know this and we discuss it, quite often we see tremendous improvement in third and fourth year. Quite often we see that students have a struggle in physics or math, and then they do extraordinary in anthropology courses. Of course, we take this into account, but you know, when Lauren was discussing our rankings in anthropology, when in our evolutionary anthropology group, remember, first you come up with the potential supervisors will give the names of the students they want to supervise. Then all of us, each of us will have to rank the students. And I can tell you that obviously, if I see a transcript of a student that got 80s and 90s in all anthropology courses, and also in physics and in algebra and in calculus, I would say, wow, this is impressive. And I will rank this student very, very high. But also it's important that quite often we say, well, I mean, this student struggled in first year, but I mean, this student has been wonderful and has been doing great in anthropology courses, has acquired experience with a lab, or you know, doing field work, have even participated in other activities, and we take that into account too when doing our rankings. So again, don't feel discouraged if your first year you had problems, or your second year, because you have a chance. I mean, there is absolutely no question about that.
I think the thing to add too is this is where you really want to see what they're asking for, because some of them, they'll say they want like the cumulative GPA, which is like everything. Others will say just the third and fourth year. Others will say just your fourth year. Others will say just anthropology courses. So and if you have questions, like email the administrator and ask them. They'll help you. They're not, again, that's what they're there for. And like I said, and as Esteban said, like, don't be discouraged if you do bad in one course. It's about trends, I think. So like, if you're doing well in all your courses and you have one blip, you know, I don't think it's going to impact you. Like, I had a meeting with a professor when I was beginning, and the professor was like, I don't know, you got a 50 in ancient Greek. And it's like, that was in second year. I don't even do ancient Greek. Like, I don't even, that's nothing to do with what I do. And I'm pretty sure, you know, he was maybe pointing it out. And as Esteban said, when everything's equal, that may come back. But again, it's not just your grades, right? It's your statement of interest. It's your reference letters. Like, if you don't have the strongest grades, maybe you have just enough grades to get into the program, but you have a really strong reference letter and really strong statements, it all kind of balances out. So there's different avenues. So don't be discouraged if you do bad in a course or not. And you can always do another course if you need to bump your average up, I guess.
Well, this might be a place to say something that actually hasn't been said, and maybe it should be taken for granted, but let's not do that. And that is, you may be applying to some programs that are really competitive, and then things like grades might be, you know, kind of make a decision, a deciding kind of factor in admission. But if you can find programs that are not as competitive, then that gives you, you know, that's just another way to kind of leverage what you bring to the table and be able to meet your goals. So that's another way to think about, you know, the question of grades and its impact on admission.
I like to say that we also look outside of your academic world. As I said before, it's very, very important for us when we see your you know, Steven was right, that we of course will check the statement of interest, where the letters of reference, but we not only stop in your transcript, we will check your resume. And we will see, wow, this student has been, since year 2, has been trying to get research experience, through the work-study program, or, doing an internship in a laboratory, or going to summer schools, or some summer field work. Those things are always important. So you have to show that you are different, that you are just basically going out of your way to acquire, interesting experience. Those things we, of course, check when we are evaluating applications. Yeah.
Okay, the next question I have is, someone asked, who are the tenured anthropology professors, and specifically the bio-ant professors?
If you go to the website, it will tell you who's associate or professor, and those are tenured. If it's assistant professor, they haven't reached tenure. So you could very quickly do that, just going to the department website.
Yeah, and U of T, the way it works is that when you are hired as an assistant professor, and you will have to just be for 5 years, and then eventually you will have to go through the tenure process, which is very, stressing. And once you just pass this process, you will be associate professor, and then a full professor. So this is how it works.
Yeah, but isn't the short answer, Esteban, that person is you?
Well, no, there are several. For example, you have Tracy Rogers and me that are tenure in biological anthropology, and then we have Tracy Galloway is going now for tenure, and of course we have this two new professors that will go in soon, Lauren and David. So I think we're 5, I believe, right now.
Well, it sounded like 2 actually that are right now.
Tenure, yeah. I'm sure we will be 5 soon.
Okay, the next question I have is there a 2-year MA program, and is the second year funded for this?
We covered that already. The MSc is the 2-year, and it's not funded for the second year.
So let me just add, though, however, that if it's anthropology you're interested in, look then to other campuses and other universities. Some of them fund the first year, but not the second year. Mm-hmm. Some of them have 1-year programs. Some of them have 1- and 2-year programs. So it really depends. I do know of 2-year MA programs that are fully funded for both years.
Do your research, check it out, like go and put the effort in when you're applying. You're going to be there for potentially 7 years. So like, make sure you know what you're getting into.
Okay, the next question I have is, does the U of T programs want GRE test results?
No.
Okay, so the next question after that is for Esteban. As the U of T programs are competitive, what is the average CGPA that can guarantee consideration or acceptance into the programs?
Again, it's not GPA because as we discussed before, there are many things involved. You have to just do a really good job with the statement of interest. You have to get good reference letters. If you can show that you have really good research experience, that's going to be a given. So I mean, we see students getting accepted with GPAs from, I don't know, 3.4 to all the way to, I mean, much higher than that. Sometimes it can be even lower, depending on, and again, if you have lots of experience in other different ways. So again, GPA is not the only factor. I have to say also that in the masters, typically we rely more, of course, on the GPA. For the PhD, now we are assuming also that you have acquired research experience during the masters. So that will also be taken into account for the PhD. Let's say if you have published a paper, as a first author or co-author, wow, this is very important. You were able to just do this during the masters. This is great. Sometimes we even have undergraduate students with papers published in journals, in peer-reviewed journals, because they were working in research groups. So all these things are important. It's not only the GPA.
I'll add one more thing to that, which is a slightly different point, which is I know when I was at McMaster, we would sometimes get applicants who had phenomenal GPAs, but they didn't fit with anyone in the department.
Yeah.
And so we didn't admit them because it wasn't about whether they could do it. It was about whether this was the right place for them to do it. So you might find, hey, I've got a 3.9 that should guarantee me entrance into wherever I want to go. And unfortunately, as Esteban said, it's not the only criteria.
Now, there are some very minute examples where the students are so good, but it's more because of a full package, but maybe they don't really have a supervisor that the department may want to get them. So maybe like they're amazing research. They don't really care who it goes with. They just want it. And their grades are amazing and they have grants and they have publications. So like you kind of have to look at what your strengths are and highlight those strengths. If your grades aren't good, you know, like they are what they are, but there's other avenues to go about it.
Okay, the next question that was asked was, when applying to graduate school and the grade requirement is, for example, an 80 average in your last year, is that your last year of credits at the time of application, or will they just look at your final year of study?
Yeah, I believe sometimes we don't have all the marks for the last semester, I believe, when students apply. So we will base our evaluations on whatever is there in the transcript. And as Lauren was saying, we primarily emphasize marks in anthropology courses. So whatever is there. So it will depend, because sometimes the students will apply in year 4 when they're almost going to finish, but sometimes the students will take a year off. So when we review the applications, we will have the complete transcript. So it's basically the information that will be there at the time of application. I believe applications open in the period is different for masters and PhD, but it will be always, you know, in the December, January, around that time.
Okay, the last question I have is, how many references should one provide?
The typical number is 2.
Can I just say, I have to go because I have to go to another meeting. So I'm just saying bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Lauren. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I believe the number is typically two reference letters. Maybe in some other schools you will need more, but I doubt that you will need more than 3. I believe in our program is 2 reference letters, but it would be 2 or 3.
All right, that was our last question. So thanks for all those who asked questions and to our speakers for answering them. About questions about grad school, I'll turn it back to Lydia to wrap this up.
Can I just add one more thing? If you don't get into the program and it gets rejected, it's okay. Like rejection, learning about rejection early on is going to help you in your life. You don't get in, you can apply the next year or look for other programs. Be flexible with what your future is going to take you.
I might also say, as a kind of last comment, I just want to get this in here because there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of the tenor of this is about, you got to remember that and you got to do this and it's a lot of work, and words like trauma and stress and anxiety, etc., have been mentioned a lot. And it's just worth also remembering there is a glorious, wonderful, flourishing, inspiring side to doing this, right? So, you know, this is something that, you know, you do this in part also because it's something that grabs you and motivates you, and all those other things are true. But, you know, let's remember that, you know, that there is, you know, anthropology or any of these other potential career paths, you know, are the process may be hard, but it can also be enormously rewarding, and that's why we do it.
Yeah, and you meet a lot of really interesting people. You meet a lot of really people that will be able to help you out. And I loved I did it at U of T. I have no regrets. I liked the master's program. I liked the PhD. I was at UTM. I liked all that. So yeah, we always harp on the negative, and it is a great experience. So remember that as well.
I fully agree. I think it's really, really important never to be discouraged. And I'm really sure that the three of us, you know, and many other faculty could tell you that we have had many, many challenges in our careers, and many of them. So don't feel discouraged about that, and just follow your passion. I mean, which is the important thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I think these were all very great points everyone brought up today. I feel like sometimes we don't talk about rejection enough. I feel like we're very competitive in nature. So we're always just striving to be the best, but sometimes we have to take a step back. Like, let's say we don't get into the master's program, and use that as an opportunity to be resilient and keep going. So it's really great points. I think we should wrap this up. We've gone a little bit over time, but that's okay. I just wanted to say thank you to all of our professors who came out to support this event. I think it's important we keep doing events like this. I know Andrew mentioned at the beginning to hold like a writing workshop with faculty for research statements. And I think that that's something really great that we could implement for next year, or even in the new year, just to get people ahead start thinking about next year's application process. So we'll definitely consider that. But thank you to our professors, and thank you to everyone else who joined us today. We will be posting the recording on our website, utmas.net. If no one else has any other questions or comments, then I will end this meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. I like just to say thank you so much, because I mean, these things are important, and you are organizing and taking the lead on this. So thank you so much for organizing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
great job, Lydia, and all of the UTMAS Society.
I mean, there's so many downsides to this pandemic, but one upside is meetings like this are kind of the ease with which they can be recorded and then filed is fantastic. And so I'm just really glad to know that the students, I can go to all the students in my class and say, hey, you might have missed this, but here's where you can find it. So great.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that, with everything being online now, it's so much easier to facilitate and organize. And that's been really nice, I think. And we've been getting a lot of students like feedback and wanting to have more of these events. So, involving more of the department and students and hosting more of these events is what we're striving to do for the society this year. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of it, me and the team. And our faculty liaison, Steven, has been helping us a lot too, which has been really nice. But if anyone ever has any feedback about future events you would like us to hold, please email us. We love feedback, suggestions as we start planning for the future for next semester.
Wonderful, thank you.
Great, take care, everybody. Thanks, Bryn. Thanks, Haley. Thanks, Lily.